Good morning. It's Wednesday. And my name's Jerry Hendricks. I'm standing here next to my good friend T. Hamilton. We're glad to be sharing some stuff with you this week through our podcast, Midweek Conversation, kind of focusing on things past and things future.
Yep. Was that a soft start? Good morning, it's Wednesday?
No, it's just a different start. I thought, man, I'd try something different.
It was good.
I don't want to get into a rut here with the things that we do. But anyways, we are glad to have the opportunity to share with you folks. If you're watching on Facebook, let us know that you're a part of our conversation. And if you have any thoughts, go ahead and share them with us there in the comments, and we'd appreciate it. Teek, how are you doing today?
I'm good. It's Wednesday.
Teek, I know it is. Teek, I know that you like old television shows.
I love old television shows.
Did you know that kids say the darndest things?
Yes. I remember, was the Art Linkletter?
I think so.
He was the first one?
Yeah.
That was a really good time. I love those shows.
Have you ever had an experience where kids said something that was kind of threw you off?
Yes. Little kids. We used to have children's sermon on Sunday mornings, and every once in a while I ended up having to do that, which is definitely not a forte of mine because I never know what's going to come out of my mouth most of the time, and apparently it's the same way with kids.
True.
So I started one time and I said, have you ever heard the phrase, sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you? And there's silence, and finally one little kid goes, no. Well, I'd built the whole sermon around that little phrase right there. That taught me a great lesson. From then on, I just stuck with Bible, not culture. It's easier that way.
Don't ask them questions.
Yeah, because that's what got the laugh. When the kid goes, no, like everybody started laughing, and I was like, okay, don't know what to do now.
Well, was it going to make you feel uncomfortable if I tell you that we want you to do a children's sermon this Sunday?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be gone.
Okay.
Again.
Well, we're not going to be doing a children's sermon
I'll be
Sunday,
here then.
but we are going to be talking about questions.
Okay.
There's a lot of questions in the Bible, and we're not getting to some of those things that are just question and answer kinds of things, but rather we're dealing with a question that was asked to Jesus, and I know that he was in that situation often from those who were following him and also those who were critics of his as well, and those that were skeptical. But on Sunday, we're going to be talking about this question of the greatest commandment. Okay, from the Gospel of Mark. It's not. It's in the other Gospels as well, but we're going to use the story from Mark and just this one question and how Jesus used it to kind of frame what our responsibility is as believers.
That kind of becomes a hinge point, not just for a series, but for our life as Christians.
Good point.
Yes.
It is a very missional message that we'll be using on Sunday. As we go into the fall, we start the fall with a launch series, which we just completed last Sunday with our good friend Casey Cockrell. And he reminded us that we've known him for 15 years.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a long time.
And when he was talking, he said that he considered me an ally in ministry. I'd never heard that before, but I kind of like it.
Is that just preacher talk?
I've never heard it before.
I mean, visiting preacher talk. I don't know.
Maybe, but I was like...
Because he was somewhat critical of me.
No, he just said he'd known you a long time. And no, he said you disciplined him in a time when he needed it.
He didn't say it was when he needed it.
Maybe he said he needed it. I'd have to go back and watch it, but that's what I heard.
If I did, I'm sure he did.
That is true.
But we completed this series Sunday with Casey, and it was a great launch for us, thinking about just as a person goes into a new semester or into a new school year, we all kind of have that September rhythm, and that's what we've been talking about. And it's a really good way for us to go all in in our own life and looking at those different things that we have ahead of us as we go into this fall season and fall semester. So this week we turn a corner and we start focusing on things that are missional. And missional, I don't know if you knew this, but it's a made-up word.
Yes, I
think
so.
As far as I know, the man that first started using that word and actually had it in print
was Jesus.
No, it wasn't.
Man.
The concept was definitely in Jesus and his ministry, but a man named Milfred Minitry wrote a book about the missional church and how the church ought to be on mission, and in everything that we do, not just send people on missions, but everything we do is centered around mission. And so we'll spend the next 4 weeks talking about what mission looks like for us as believers and followers of Christ in Sweetwater, our surrounding areas, and specifically or particularly through the life of our church and the ministries that we have here.
I think a lot of times we confuse missions and missional. And missional kind of gets to the heart of you start where you are. Wherever you are at that moment, you're on mission. Whereas missions, a lot of time we think about leaving and going somewhere, even though you're supposed to be doing missions in your own community also.
Right.
But I think it's easier to say, hey, let's go do this mission trip than it is to think about how you do that on a daily basis.
Well, it just reminds me, I just completed a 30-day online course, and every video started with your mission if you choose to accept it.
Nice.
And so
an old TV show.
I probably will not use that Sunday, but it's out there, and it's something that people recognize. But we look at not just the church's mission and that description of that, but how we participate in that and how we're part of that. And when you think about mission and how a church understands that, typically there's a couple of texts that give guidance to that. And one is the Great Commission at the end of the Gospel of Matthew, and where he commands his disciples to go into all the world and to preach the gospel, to help people understand what the gospel was going to be about. And then the other parallel passage to really a church discovering mission is this is understanding the greatest commandment. And as he goes through this and he's asked this question, he turns it just a little bit from what the answer that they were expecting. I mean, it was one of those deals where it wasn't a setup question to set Jesus up to look good or to say the right thing, but rather it was a question to really, I think, kind of clarify where Jesus stood in terms of the old teachings, and because he was shaking things up a bit. And he introduces the idea of neighbor. And so Sunday, we're going to be talking about two things in particular. One, great question. And then two, what does it mean to be a neighbor?
Okay.
Now, I hear that you're a pretty good neighbor.
I think so. I do have a house that I've lived in for 10 years now, and I've had the same neighbors on one side for 10 years. On the other side, I've had a lot of different neighbors, so I don't know if that's me or not, but I think I am.
I admire the way that you get to know your neighbors.
I do know my neighbors.
And because we've talked, I've been here half the time that you have. I've been here nearly 5 years. And a lot of times through the life of our church or events that we have or relationships that will come up in conversation, there are people who at one time your neighbor, and you know them and you know something about them, and you still know kind of where they are in the community.
Right. Yeah.
So
that's
impressive.
Part of that is Stacy and I like to go on walks, especially at night, and it's amazing how often people are outside, and so you just stop and talk, and then you get to know people really well that way. But then also kind of chasing down people as they come by your house and just going and talking to them. Sometimes that works out well, sometimes not so well, but most of the time it works out well.
Just recently we had a new couple who attended our church because they were walking their dogs, and one of our members here was neighborly, and they invited him to church. And so they showed up for that. One of the questions that I want to be thinking about in preparation for Sunday is, when we think about our neighbors, and I guess the first thought we go to when we talk about neighbors, and even in the context where Jesus brings this up, we think those who are in proximity to us, probably where we live, because we use neighborhoods and that kind of language. But one of the questions I think that's important is that we might ask ourselves, are our neighbors glad that we live on their street? You know, I was listening to you talk about your neighborliness. I've always felt like Sharon was better at that in our neighborhoods. She knows, we live on a cul-de-sac in Abilene, and she knows everyone's name and she knows a little bit about them. I don't know if my excuse was felt like I was gone all the time, but I think there's something about just being intentional, like you and Stacy have, and Sharon and others, in getting to know those people who are around you.
Well, I think some of that started with when we were at Crosspoint. We had just moved to a house in Abilene, and you said something, I don't know if it was in a message or if you were just telling in the church, to think about your neighborhood, the people on your street, and how you relate to them. And we went home and said, let's do a barbecue. And so we literally printed up our own little flyers and invited everybody on our street to come over, have burgers and grilled corn. And the funny thing was, this might talk about my grilling expertise, the corn was a bigger hit than the burgers were. I can remember we ran out of corn, we did not run out of burgers. Did you come to that?
I may have. I remember us. That was an engaging group of folks that we had at that time, and so I know that there were several things that we did in the community to get to know folks.
So that was probably my first experience in that. But growing
I
up,
did come over there, but I do remember that
because you met our neighbors who were the police officers,
and I ate a burger.
Thank you.
At least one,
Thank
and
you.
probably a hot dog. Probably a hot dog also.
There definitely were hot dogs.
I'm
also.
not sure I ate corn, but anyways. But it's something about that, and then the theme for our this missional series that we're doing is called Radius, and it was inspired by one of our camp pastors. Second week in a row that one of our relationships through camp have kind of become a part of what we're doing. But they're a part of a church in Lexington, South Carolina, and the name of their church is Radius.
Interesting.
It is an interesting name, and as Russell was describing, it was a church plant. The church is over 10 years old now, just over 10, I think. I believe in his telling of the story, the people who were friends with this church starter were telling him that's not a good name for your church. But he did it intentionally because he wanted the name of the church to describe the mission of the church.
Right.
And so a part of that is understanding what it means to be a neighbor, to be neighborly, but to also, when we think about radius, that radius of our life moves throughout different places. And so we have the opportunity to be neighbor wherever we are,
right,
and whatever we're involved in. And so in some ways, it's just a mindset shift, I think, for us as disciples of Christ as we share our faith. And, we talk about different ways to do that. And some of that is just understanding what it means to be neighbor wherever we are.
I like it. It moves the center of your mission from your church building to where you are, which encompasses the world. You can't fulfill the Great Commission by focusing just on the church building.
So let me ask you a question.
Uh-oh.
Is there a possibility that this text and this theme might inspire among us and those who listen to do something like you just described as far as having a barbecue in their neighborhood?
I would hope so. I mean, I think if you take seriously the idea that God's going to show you something new in worship and God's going to change you, that hopefully that's a place God would lead someone.
One of my friends, Thomas, who's been coming to church here for a while, he is working on a project in his neighborhood, and he's new to his neighborhood, and his event is called Pie on the Porch.
That's a great idea.
Well, it's nice to have a porch, too.
Pie's good. I'll
But
do
very
it in our
pie, porch, I'm there.
Yeah.
But I'm not invited.
I'm moving.
Not yet. You're moving into his neighborhood. Radius is our theme. It's going to be real exciting to jump into this and understand this. And then ultimately, I think we're starting soft. I think it's easy for us to understand what being a good neighbor means. Maybe open up our hearts to what it means to being a neighbor on our streets or wherever it is that we go. But we're going to get into some more difficult things that are going to challenge us through the different texts that we follow in this series. And I'm hoping that all of us have the opportunity to let God really speak to us and challenge us and maybe get a little bit uncomfortable in trying to understand what our radius is and how God wants to use that.
I like it. I'm excited about it.
I think
a good series to follow up all in.
I think so, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We've had a great week. This is Wednesday, of course, and we have Wednesday Night Live tonight with everything already going full speed ahead. We had record numbers of kids last week, so it's going to be a lot of fun to see kind of what happens as that we build towards this semester. So I'll see you tonight on the third floor, and I'll see you on Sunday.
I'll be there.